So we have talked about how to map and visualize density values. Now we turn to the question of how can we calculate density. Sometimes it's given. Other cases we have to develop a strategy to calculate those densities. For example, if you have the known location of business, if you want to calculate the density, you may have to start with two ways.
You may either calculate density based on regular grid, or you can calculate density on irregular areas.
Okay, so there's a number of steps that you have to go through. The ArcGIS will help you to calculate density. So let's assume that you're given a set of point data which represent crime. In this particular map is describing the area of Baltimore in Maryland. And we know that there's some locations of different kind of crime. So if you want to calculate the crime density and map them onto the regular grids, then what you're facing, the first problem is how do I find a regular grid? Right? If you cannot find one, you have to create one. Right? Well, fortunately, we have so many tools we can use to create a regular grid, but you basically need to make a number of decisions as to how large the grid should be, where the grid should be defined. Should that be defined on general area, or should that grid be defined on a predefined area, for example, Baltimore City? To create a regular grid, what you can do is to start the OpenGeoDA. Under the tools, we can create shapes by regular grid as polygon. By doing this, you will be able to specify the range or extent of the grids, and also you can specify by indicating how many rows and columns. By doing that, the system will calculate the size of each grid based on the extent and the number of rows and columns. And the end result will be exported to a shapefile, which can be used either by OpenGeoDA or by ArcGIS. After you create a grid, then you can use the grid in your ArcGIS project. Here we show you the idea of how to do that. Basically, you can show the crime data together with the grid, okay, and then in order to calculate the count for each grid, what you need to do is to do a spatial join. Okay, remember you can do a spatial join. So in the dialog box, you indicate the join data from another layer based on spatial location. So when you do this spatial join, the target layer is the grid. Okay, you want to append the count number of crime to the grid data. And the source is actually from the crime. In this case, the layer is called Baltimore Police Department offered universal uniform crime reports. Okay? They report the point crime data by categories. Okay? So if you right-click on Grid 20 layer and then select the Join and Relate, and then select the Join by spatial location. Okay, and then choose the crime layer as the input. Okay, make sure you choose the first choice and the second category. What kind of result you need. Okay? So in this case, indicate each polygon will be given a summary of the number of features, number of things inside that polygon. This is what we need. We need a count, okay? And try to understand what is the difference between the first choice and second choice. Okay. So if you just need a simple count, choosing the first choice is enough. You don't have to check any of the boxes below it. Mapping the density by dot density map is relatively easy. You can do this within ArcGIS. So if you have the density value appended to the map data, what you can do is to go to symbolize the layer property and choose the dot density under the quantities category. Okay, and then what you need to do is to choose the proper field There could be population density, there could be crime density. And then you need to decide on what is the dot size and what is the dot color, and that will determine how many things are represented by each dot. Follow the dialog box. You will be able to get a rough design, but you can always try multiple designs and see which one is better. For example, the size of the dots may have a very much impact on whether the dot density map is readable. So you don't want the dot to cover the whole area without being able to tell the relative density. And if your density value have a large range, you have to consider both the low density and high density area all have some presence on your map. With that, I want to conclude this lecture by saying that mapping dot density or area density is very useful, and you can learn this from the exercises we're going to follow this week. You should try to reflect on the concept we talked about today, why we do dot density map, what's the advantage or disadvantage of dot density map, and how does it compare to other color graded density maps. And you should clearly understand how to interpret the density maps, what kind of conclusion you can draw from them. So we talk about spotting hot areas, compare regions, and also selection, because density is the concern. Right? And be careful when you apply those techniques to the right data. So we also talk about combining OpenGL DA with ArcGIS for doing the analysis. This is a common pattern. Usually when we do with analytics works, you may find that none of the tools provide you with a holistic package. You may have to pick and choose from multiple tools and develop your own procedure. So the more you know about those tools and you're more creative,